I want to ask you, what constitutes a dignified life? Because that's what I'm really asking. I mean, you could say, oh, everyone deserves food and shelter, but then just shoving everyone into some tenement somewhere where they have their food dropped through a chute and a little screen that plays Bugs Bunny for them 24/7, and they're warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and that's all they have. That's not a dignified life. But then, well, let's face it, just everyone, gee, there's only so many of some things that we can give everybody. Like, in theory, there are only so many mansions on the beach, and only so many people can live in those mansions on the beach. So what is a dignified life? What is the basic level of life that every person should expect to have in a society? And I'm not talking about, like, maybe there's been a natural disaster, we're all working together to rebuild our society. I'm saying that everything else being equal and plenty being abounding, what's a dignified life? I mean, if we say everybody has to work, then that's okay, and maybe people want to contribute to the society, but if people have ideas that are completely new that no one has thought of before, then any pre-existing system isn't going to account for them. And, while every person may feel that they have an obligation to contribute to society, what is that contribution going to be? I mean, if we're going to say that people have freedom, then that would mean they would have the freedom not to work. And that would mean they would have the freedom not to vote, or the freedom not to believe in what they believe, or the freedom not to accept an economic paradigm. And if you're going to make it so that people don't have the freedom to not participate or not participate in the conventional ways, then you don't have freedom. Yes, people, we need a society in order to exist and have the fundamentals of life and the basic lines and the framework of life. But if people aren't motivated on their own to continue and perpetuate the society without being forced into slavery, then maybe that society shouldn't exist. If people aren't going to be willing to work without the threat of starvation if they're not paid, then maybe that's a society they shouldn't be a part of. If you aren't spontaneous in your heart, like, yes, if we're going to expect soldiers to fight for this country, then we would clearly expect farmers to farm food for this country. And we would clearly expect poets to write poems for our country, or our world, or our people, or our species. But if we're going to start everything on this punitive idea that people are fundamentally deadbeats and they need to be forced to earn their living, and if they aren't earning that living, there must be something wrong with them, that's just like the same as original sin. And if you're going to have this patently absurd framework, there's no way you can have freedom, because you can't visualize freedom outside of the narrow confines of working a 9 to 5 and having such and such an economic status. You have no parameters or abilities to have people exist outside of that construct except as deadbeats. And, Thoreau was not a deadbeat. Thoreau was considered the only philosopher America ever had, basically. And, what would you say about him? Well, he walked away from society, he built a log cabin with his bare hands in the middle of the woods and lived there for 2 years. That's a deadbeat! Alright? So what I'm trying to say is that's what he had to do to have an original thought. Okay? And that is how constrictive your freedom is.